I'm going to show you an easy technique for painting watercolor poppies in Procreate. This method works with any brushes, but I'll link the brush kit that I'm using in the description just in case you want to follow along with me exactly. So poppies have a kind of shallow bowl shape, so I'm first going to make a sketch like this so I have a kind of rough plan. After that, I'll make a new layer below the sketch, and this is the layer we're going to start painting on. So for my color, I'm going to use a medium kind of magenta tone. And for the brush, I want to use a kind of bumpy or rough watercolor brush. So I'm going to use the abstract round for this. And I'm going to start by painting the petal that's closest to us. Just like this. And it has kind of 3 bumps on top. Now if I continue painting the other 3 petals, what's going to happen is it's going to overlap and sort of cover up this petal. And you get this kind of transparent effect. I don't think that looks pretty good. So I want to isolate and kind of mask off this petal to protect it. So to do that, I'm going to grab the selection tool, set to automatic, and I'm just going to select out here in the white area. It turns blue so you know it's selected. Now when I paint, it lets me paint in the white area where I selected, but it won't let me paint on top of this petal. So for the next petal, I'm going to do the furthest one. It's going to be a kind of similar shape, except that towards the bottom, I'm going to go over it again to make it a little bit darker, and this also gives it more contrast. Now for the side petals, I'm going to do the same thing, but first I'm going to deselect everything. Then again, automatic selection tool, select the white area, and I'll do the side petals like this. And once the petals are roughed out, I'm going to get rid of the sketch because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to switch to the eraser brush here, and I'm going to set it to the fine liner pen. And I'm going to use this to clean up the edges of some of these petals and also add some splits. Now this is optional, but I want to grab the water blender brush and use it to smooth out some of these hard edges. Now sometimes with digital watercolor, the colors are too perfect and consistent, so I want to add a slight color variation to each petal. So to do that, I'm going to grab the freehand selection tool. I'm just going to select one petal, kind of roughly. Then I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'm just going to shift the hue a tiny bit, just like 1 or 2%. And I'm going to do this to each petal so they're all just a little bit different. Now with a lot of poppy flowers, the petals actually get darker when they go to the base. So to get that effect, I'm going to use the selection tool, set to freehand, and I'm just going to select the base of the 3 flower petals that are closest to us. I'll feather it out just a little bit. Again, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just darken those and saturate them a little bit. Next, I want to add a kind of line texture to the petals. So that's going to be on its own blank layer. For the color, I'll use a dark and desaturated version of the flower color. And for the brush, I'm going to use some kind of pen brush. This time I'll use the fine liner pen. And I'll use it at kind of a small size, and I'll do a couple of lines here as an example. There we go. Now I did this on its own layer, so I can change the transparency mode to color burn. Then I can lower it to 0 and slowly kind of raise it back up until I can barely see that line pattern. There we go. And then I'm just going to continue with this and add a bunch of lines just parallel on each petal. And after that, I'm going to make another blank layer. And I'm going to use the same fine liner pen and a yellow color to paint the pistil. And then I'll use a dark bluish black color to do all the stamens. And once the flower's finished, I'll merge all the layers for it together onto one. And then I'll make another blank layer and kind of make another sketch that plans the rest of this illustration out with the leaves, the stem, and the seed pod. Now when it comes to painting this part of the flower, I like to start with the leaves first. So I'll choose a kind of yellowy green tone for those. For the brush, I'm going to switch back to the abstract round. And these leaves are going to be stroke based. So basically I'm just going to start with a light pressure, press harder, and then taper it off again. And I'll use the same trick on the sides of the leaves, and I'm going to do this for all the leaves. Now for the stems, I'm going to change my color to a slightly darker version and slightly bluer version of that same green. For the brush, I'm going to change it to the hard edge round brush, and I'll just fill in the stems and the seed pod like this. And once that's done, I can get rid of the sketch. I don't need it anymore. And you can see there's a lot of overlapping here where the different strokes are coming together. So to fix that, I'm going to grab the water blender brush. And at a pretty small size, I'm just going to go in there and smooth that out. Now the reason I've painted the petals and the leaves in a loose style while the stems and the seed pod are in a much cleaner style is because when I look at a photograph of a poppy, I'm paying close attention to the texture of the different parts of the flower and making sure I capture those in the texture of the illustration. And since two different kind of styles here are sort of coming together, sometimes they don't match up perfectly, and this might not bother you, but if you want to fix these areas, you can go to the adjustments, go to liquify, change it to push, and you can copy these settings. And I'm just going to use this at a pretty small size, kind of use it to push this area and find a compromise between the smooth stem and the rough leaf. And I'll do the same thing to this one down here. There we go. And I'm going to continue on the same layer. I'm going to use the fine liner pen brush, and I'm just going to do the details on the seed pod, the lines for the veins on the leaves, and also some tiny dark green hairs on the stems. And once those details are finished, we can move on and finish up this illustration by adding some shadows and highlights. And those are all going to be done with the freehand selection tool. And as an example, I want to put a shadow down here being cast by this leaf. So I'll just select this area, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just slightly darken it. And I'm going to go through the whole illustration and add shadows just wherever I think it needs it. And then I'm going to do the same process again, but I'll brighten it this time, and that's how I'm going to add the highlights. And just like that, our poppy flower is all done. If you enjoyed this video and you think I've earned it, please don't forget to give it a like. And if you subscribe to my channel, I only post videos once a week on Thursdays, so I promise I won't flood your YouTube homepage.